1874, the podcast with Dan Bardell and Gregg Evans.
Hello, welcome to the 1874 podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by the Athletics' Gregg Evans. We're here to look back on Villa's first defeat in a while, actually away at Nottingham Forest. Not often Gregg and I have spoken about a defeat. It feels like a very long time ago since we did a podcast after a defeat, Gregg. But before we get into the game, how are you?
Yeah, hello Dan, I'm good, thank you. Probably a little bit better than you. I know that your weekend was ruined, wasn't it, by the Villa game? Well, not so much ruined, but an edge taken off it, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the away end yesterday was very almost accepting of a defeat because they realise that we're such a good team now and that these are the rarities, and they know that the manager's going to look at that game and it's going to haunt him for days on end probably, and that there'll be a reaction probably next week at home against Fulham. I think it's really important not to stagnate and not go on a run of losing games. I think in general Villa have done that really well in recent times where they've lost a game. It hasn't then turned to 2 or 3. They had that first run where they lost 3 in a row under Emery. But other than that, they've managed to not go on these big runs of defeat. So I think the fans are quite realistic, realise that we're not going to win every game. You know, defeats will probably come here and there. And I just thought, the away end were pretty accepting of what happened. The players came over at the end of the game, and there was an applause for them all. There was no booing whatsoever, no real negativity in the ground. It was just accepted that Villa had an off day. I think Forest set up really, really well, had a game plan, and it worked for them. Conceded goals at bad times, perhaps for Villa, and those goals change the game state, really, don't they? You know, Forest don't score after 5 minutes. The game probably heads in a different direction, but they did, and then that just completely changes the way the game's going. So I think, there was some realism, but also realising that we didn't play well yesterday.
No, and I mean, I don't think Villa were bad.
No, not
bad. I think for the last sort of 65, 70 minutes, they were, they had a go, didn't they? They just couldn't quite break Forest down. And as you say, Forest had a very good game plan. And I think we're probably going to see a little bit more of that now, aren't we? Because it feels like Villa are marked, they're marked men now. And that's probably a really big compliment that you can pay towards the team and the manager, because they've got this run going now where teams are genuinely scared of them. And Forest would have worked very hard on that game plan. And it was risky, because that high press that they put on Villa, if that goes wrong and Villa play out from them, Villa managed to find a way, through the lines. They're away very quickly and they can get them on the break. So fair play to Forest. And just find it really interesting, really, how the dynamic of the Premier League sets up. I was at the Luton-Liverpool game yesterday, and the two teams I cover obviously heavily are Liverpool and Villa, and Liverpool beat Nottingham Forest 3-0 really comfortably last week. Villa beat Luton 3-1, which should have been 3-0 really comfortably, and then they both swapped their opponents around away from home and both failed to beat them. And it just shows, doesn't it, in the Premier League, away games can be really difficult. I think Villa are struggling a little bit on the road, aren't they? Certainly compared to their home form anyway. But just shows that there's going to be a few bumps in the road. But as you say, Dan, the important thing now is fighting back from that and showing some sort of reaction in midweek and then on the weekend.
Yeah, before we get into more detail into the game, usually I criticise Adam's mistakes. He's had to pull me up on a mistake that I've made early on in the show. For the second week running, I've forgotten to mention our sponsors, NordVPN. I can't even say our sponsors. I've forgotten to mention our sponsors, NordVPN. So I'll do that now before Gregg and myself get into the game in a little bit more detail. You can grab an exclusive NordVPN deal by going to 1874.io/NordVPN. If you do that, you'll get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, and you'll also get 4 months for free. It is completely risk-free. If you're not satisfied, Nord have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to make use of NordVPN and help our channel as well, if you're enjoying our content, then please go and check that information out. The info is in the description, and we'll also hear a little bit more about NordVPN later on in the show. So Gregg, I think what you've said about is a compliment that Forest have had to come up with a game plan to play against Villa. They've come up with one. They've identified Villa's strengths, maybe identified a few weaknesses as well. And I felt from probably very early on in the game, if they had an attack even before they scored, Forest had identified that Villa play with a pretty high line. If you're quite quick and incisive with your passing, perhaps you can get and take advantage of that high line pretty quickly. Forest were boosted by having a 1 year back. I don't think that they'd have been able to play that way without him. He's a really, really good focal point for them. He didn't really have many chances or score a goal, but I think he was a real enabler of what Forest were able to do yesterday. And a bit like the Liverpool game, a bit like the Newcastle game, they had a wide player that caused Villa problems, and I felt in that first half it was Elanga who got a bit at Matty Cash. If I go back to the Liverpool game, it felt like Diaz got at Villa in that defeat a little bit as well, if my memory serves me correctly. Newcastle, Anthony Gordon caused us problems. So if teams are quick and play against Villa's high line and get the ball out to that fast wide player, that seems to be an avenue that has caused us problems in away defeats.
Yeah, I think so. I've noticed that trend as well. Pacey wingers or pacey forward players, and Villa have got two themselves in Diaby and Watkins can really hurt teams. And when there's that overload, which I think at times there was, it's difficult for defensive units to contain that. I think the high line it comes up a lot, doesn't it? This high line now. You never hear anything about it when Villa win because they execute it perfectly. And at times, even yesterday, they did it well, and they were organised very well. And I'm not. Look, I'm not a tactician. I'm not a football manager who has spent years and years researching styles of play. But I think when a team struggles to play through a high line and marginally gets it wrong, I think that's to the credit of the back line. I think they're doing a really good job, and often what we see in analysis, sort of more nationwide, where people that don't watch or cover Villa regularly, is that the high line, is causing Villa problems when they lose, and that they're a bit mad to do this, but way more often than not, it's worked for Villa, so they're not going to change this. This is what they've worked on with Emery, and it's not going to change. And more often than not, they get it right. But I do take your point. Yeah, if an opposing team gets it right, then they can really expose it. And you wonder now with tough games coming up, against Man City and Newcastle and Arsenal in the weeks ahead and months ahead, whether those teams will look to do the same and whether it will be even harder or even easier for them to expose that. Be interesting to see if Villa do change that tactic and just drop a little bit deeper, because it might help them out a bit. But I just think the high lines work much better than it hasn't in previous in the year that Emery's been in charge. So credit to Nottingham Forest, they got it right on the day, but I don't think many other teams will.
I think you're right. It was a boring podcast when I agree with you all the time, but I do agree with what you're saying. Even yesterday, I wouldn't say Villa got the high line wrong, because they limited Nottingham Forest really. They didn't create too many chances, and they were called offside a fair few times in that game. That high line, it looks close, but it's actually just so well rehearsed that it works. It looks close, but actually they know what they're doing. Villa, and they caught them offside countless times yesterday. I haven't seen the stats back, but I would wager it was at least 3 or 4 times that Forest got caught offside from Villa's high line. Maybe it wasn't the high line that was the problem. I think Forest kind of played through Villa quickly.
Yeah,
that was the problem. And I think on the flip side of that, Villa couldn't play through Nottingham Forest. They were very compact. The two central midfielders sitting in front of the back four, Mangala and Sanagre. I might have said his name. Sangare, sorry. They protected that back four really, really well yesterday. But then Forest just managed to spring that couple of times, and they weren't really good chances, in fairness. The first one's kind of come through bodies. I think Martinez is never going to save it. Anya's hit it well. That's his first goal for Nottingham Forest. The second goal, it's a freak goal. Martinez will probably never ever do that again. So 2 goals from outside the penalty area, which that feels quite rare for Villa to concede. Those kind of goals. Do you think that's something that might get looked at? Perhaps the closing. I think the first one was really unlucky, but maybe for the second one, he probably had too much time to shoot, and then it is just, we'll never see that happen again with Emiliano Martinez. Definitely not this season. Well, let's not curse it. I wouldn't think we'll see that again.
No, I mean, look, having known Martinez in the way that I do, he will be stewing over that today. He'll be going over video. He'll be in the video analysis room, looking at why it went wrong, how he can put it right. He spends so much time trying to be the best goalkeeper that he can possibly be, and even when it isn't his fault, he often blames himself because he thinks, what could I have done different? So, he'll be really down about that after a pretty incredible week for him. Being named the best goalkeeper in the world, and rightly so. I think he's certainly up there anyway, isn't he? I think he's amazing. He's been brilliant for Villa, saved them so many points over the years that it's only human, and he's allowed a mistake here and there.
Yeah.
I think the last mistake he made maybe was the Arsenal game, wasn't it? I can't think of many others.
Even that's harsh to call it a mistake, isn't it? He's hit him on the back of the head and gone in, and then he Emery called him out for going out for the corner, didn't they? That was. He doesn't make Man U's the last one I remember him really making one where I really think he should have saved it. That Man U game under Gerrard, and that was ages ago.
Yeah,
when he dropped one in. I can't think of anything else like that.
The bottom line is he doesn't make many mistakes. That was a one-off yesterday. Shows he's human. He's going to be very down about it this week, but I'm sure he'll make amends in the weeks ahead. Absolutely no doubt about that. In terms of the long range sort of efforts and the goals from outside the box, that will be a bit an element of bad misfortune. I think have to sometimes just accept that results don't go your way, and perhaps that's what it was for Villa yesterday. Just one of those days where Forest, stifled them. I think the best part of Forest's game plan was the pressing, really, the way they stifled them and wouldn't let them play out from the back. Luis was Villa's typical playmaker. He has the most passes, he has the most touches, he makes the most passes. He just couldn't get going. It's good, very good management from Steve Cooper to really identify him and stop him playing, because that kind of stopped Villa playing as well. And I think Villa did everything right in the game. Really, I think they moved it around quickly. They made changes at the right time. Bailey kept coming on at half time to try and freshen things up. They stuck to the game plan. They didn't go long. They worked on the patterns of play that Emery wants them to build up with, and they created a couple of chances. It was just one of those days, yeah.
Frustrating day.
Just a frustrating day, yeah. It's good to know though that the reaction in the away end was very positive. I think you can always judge how well Villa are doing by the reaction of the away fans. I've always found that, covering Villa for so many years now. When the away fans turn on the team, it's really bad. But if they haven't turned, that there's a lot of positivity there. And look, Villa are in a good place, aren't they? They don't lose too many games now. The good thing is they've got games coming up, one in midweek, one at the weekend. I mean, perhaps the strange thing about it was they might have just been knocked a little bit out of sync, and
it's bizarre, that, isn't it?
The Thursday, Sunday schedule that we were saying is going to cause them so many problems this season, it might actually be working for them. It might, players like rhythm and being in sync, whether they're used to match, rest, train, match, rather than train, match. So it's just maybe a little bit different for them this week. And perhaps Emery just, studied too much. I think he said in the week he'd gone over 27 hours of footage of Nottingham Forest, and in a week where they have 3 games, he probably wouldn't have had that time to do it. So maybe he just overthought it.
That's bizarre, isn't it, that? But I think I read Jacob Tanswell's piece this morning on the Athletic. I'm sure he referenced Matty Cash saying about he almost knocked. I might have completely made that up and dreamt it. I'm sure I read that this morning in Jacob's piece. One of the players, anyway. I'm sure I read that they said he did almost knock them. Not have, because it's weird to have the game on a chance for Villa to have a game on Saturday, and it gets moved for TV. So we've gone a whole week without having a game, but back to normal this week, Thursday, Sunday. We'll be back where we like to be. 2 games at Villa Park as well. The home form, the away form, it's not a concern, but it's nowhere near as consistent as the home form. 2 home games now. You'd really back Villa to win both of those games and not go on a little mini run where you end up losing a few games. So I think that's a real positive. And sometimes you just have to give the opposition credit. We come here often and talk about Emery's game plan. He did this, he did that. It was perfect. It worked really well. Forest shackled Villa. Yesterday made life very difficult for them. Yeah. Didn't make loads happen going forward, but when they did come forward, they identified ways of hurting Villa, and and it worked. So sometimes you do have to give them credit. It was a big win for them. Forest actually, I've spent a bit of time at Forest. I don't follow them, but I know probably the lie of the land at Forest better than I do all the other clubs other than Villa. Their fans were saying that they've had home games this season, not been performing well. They had the Luton game a few weeks ago where they were 2-0 up and then they get it back to 2-2. That dents confidence. They've had a few injuries. Home form hasn't been good, but actually playing against a better team and the atmosphere at the City, I've got to say, they're an away game. That's the best set of home fans I've seen for years, bar none. They at the end of that game, all swinging their scarves. They were really creating a fervent atmosphere at the City ground. They're really behind the manager as well, despite the fact they have stumbled in recent weeks. So it actually suited them in a way, according to the Forest fans, that they were playing against a better team. I think their fans have been waiting for a game like this because they've said that the games they've had at the City ground have been games that they expected to win and they haven't won them. So this is, this was an opportunity for them to get a scalp, and they picked up a few scalps towards the end of the season. So with the 1 year back as well, I almost felt like it was everything was kind of pulling in Forest's direction. It was the kind of things that suited them because they've really missed him since he's been injured. He didn't score, but he was on an incredible scoring run before he got injured. He was a big reason why they stayed up. I think that front three of Alanga, him and Gibbs White, that's a difficult front three to play against. A few teams will struggle going to the City ground and playing against that front three, I would say.
Yeah, it's a strong front three. I like all three players. Yes, they've all got individual qualities, and there were quite a few clubs actually, real big clubs that were looking at 1 year in the last transfer window.
Chelsea were one, weren't they?
Yeah, Chelsea were interested, and a couple more were looking at him, and he's still a relatively young lad. He left Liverpool at a young age, moved abroad, and come back, and he's looked the part this year. They've missed him. Gives them that physical presence, but can also score goals as well. Yeah, he's good. He's good.
Bit all round, actually. A bit all round what you want from a centre forward in a lot of ways.
Not too many like them, are there, really? Forest remind me a little bit like Villa a couple of years ago, just kind of trying to find their feet in the Premier League, trying to establish themselves, spending relatively big, buying quite a lot of players. They've gone a little bit crazier than Villa did in terms of the volume of players they've bought. But they've had to reshape the squad and transition from a club that had been in the Championship for too long. And now they're trying to establish themselves in the Premier League. Look, they've got a little bit of catching up to do like Villa have, but, if they get it right, get the right players in, there's no reason why they can't kick on like Villa have. But I think what we were seeing like last year with teams, Newcastle and Brighton, where they had a very, very good run of form. Teams are starting or trying to figure them out a little bit and coming to their games now with a specific game plan. And I think that's what is going to happen with Villa now. The lower ranked teams in the division, they know that they can't just come and play like they used to. They're going to have to pick certain weaknesses in the Villa team and try and try and create from there. I think Forest did that great, but I think more often than not Villa will get it right.
Yeah, agree with you. I just wanted to ask you, we haven't really planned anything, so we just talk on the cuff, so I don't know whether you'll be able to answer what I'm about to ask you. I've not noticed this so much when I've watched games, like away games on TV, or when I'm in my seat at home games. I've not noticed this as much, but I noticed it yesterday being on pitch level. Is that actually we talked about Constance needing to step up maybe in Mings' absence and become a leader and talk and be the organiser. What I noticed yesterday, I think he was probably Villa's best player yesterday. In actual fact, Pau Torres, he's actually pretty vocal, and he seems to be the organiser. I think, which makes sense because obviously he's relied upon to try and progress the ball forward at times, almost like a number 6, because he steps out of that defence and comes forward with the ball and can pick a pass. He actually is a lot more vocal than I previously noticed. It's almost like he's taken on a bit of a leadership role. I don't know how much you know about how he settled in behind the scenes and how he's finding things at Villa, but that was just something that caught my eye yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Villa miss Tyrone Mings, don't they? They miss his leadership, they miss his on-field qualities. But the players have spoken about Torres and how he settled in really quickly and how that's helped Villa. And look, they needed it. They needed him to really hit the ground running because with Diego Carlos, there was always a little bit of a risk with the long-term injury that he had previously. Hadn't played too many games. Obviously for Villa this season, but they really needed Torres to settle in, and he has done. He's quite a quiet lad, sort of keeps himself to himself a little bit around the place. He's obviously very close with his partner, who he shares a lot of majority of his time with Villa. You know, the sort of Spanish and Portuguese speaking sort of community. You know, he can fit into that group quite well.
Has he fitted in? Has he gone into that group? I'm sure I saw that they had a Halloween party the other night. I'm not sure
Yeah, I think there was
he
some
was he
Halloween
there?
celebrations.
I can't remember if I saw he was there or not amongst all those. Like, is that
He
kind
was
of
dressed
group
up as a
that
Peaky Blinder, wasn't he, old Torres? Yeah,
maybe?
and him
Yes,
and his
yes.
wife, and they just got married over the summer. And look, you know, for someone like him, he was born in Valencia, so look, you know, he spent all of his time at Villarreal. It's his local town, and you know, he's there was always the question of, is he going to go and settle in at a Premier League club? Luckily, he knows Emery, and that helped. And I think the Spanish speakers have helped a little bit at Villa. But you know, he's settled in well, and he's found his feet. And yeah, there are a group, you know, a leadership group still at Villa. The vocal ones, the ones that will make decisions week to week. John McGinn really is not that much of a vocal presence on
You see, I
the
think
pitch.
he's become a lot. He's grown into that role. I would
He
say.
certainly has grown into it, but he's not always typically been one that will sort of rant and rave and shout throughout the games and guide. It's more of his energy that people bounce off. But he's obviously got a little bit of the vocal side of things. He has to, but I think Villa have got a nice mix. You know, they've got a good mix of strong characters, but players that can be vocal as well if they need to, but also performance leaders as well.
It's good to see him stepping up, though, isn't it? Because again, there was a few concerns about him. Let's say, which was a bit harsh because he'd literally just come in, and he was going to struggle to adapt to the physical side. Wasn't going to pay. Looked like he didn't have the pace, perhaps, that was required for the Premier League. But actually, in some ways, he's such a good defender that because kind of his positional sense kind of negates some of that stuff at times. He got caught out a few times early days, as you would expect, because he also got thrown into the team probably a lot quicker and in a different position than Villa were planning to use him. I think it was pretty clear that he was going to start the season as a left back probably, and Villa would go into that back three with Mings and Konsa, and the right back, probably Cash, would have bombed on. It was clear that was probably the way Villa were going to set up at the start of the season, but they had to kind of reinvent what they were doing due to the Mings injury. So that would have eased him into the physical side, I think, being part of that back three. But he's ended up having to play as a lead centre back. But in recent weeks, I really, really think he's growing. I thought he was brilliant against Luton, both on the ball and off the ball in terms of the defensive side of the game. And again, just he was the one yesterday that I felt was trying to drive Villa forward, was trying to play the ball forward. Just wanted to ask you as well about team selection. At the moment, it feels like there's 10 that are in the best 11, and then that 11th man is quite fluid. It might be Carlos some games, it might be Bailey, it might be Zaniola at the moment until we get Ramsey or Moreno back. That's it seems that there's 10 plus one more. But I actually thought yesterday the game was actually in a lot of ways crying out for Tielemans. And I know he came on relatively early. I said that. I said that in the ground yesterday because we were struggling to break them down. And Villa have got some really good progressors of the ball in their team. But what I've noticed about Tielemans is he can progress the ball forward, but he also can do it first time at speed. And I felt that was kind of what Villa were missing at times. It got a little bit slow, and I thought Tielemans came on and offered some good touches. And he did an interview, I think it was last week, potentially, where, he talked about the fact that, he's not in the team and that he's finding it difficult, wants to be in the team, but he isn't unhappy at Villa, but ultimately he wants to play football. How are we going to get him in the team? Because at the moment, there doesn't seem he doesn't become that 11th man at the moment in that space, or if he did, I'm not sure how Villa would line up. It's hard.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to that is stay in the Europa Conference League as long as possible, have an extended run in the FA Cup, and he's going to get minutes, inevitably then, because the games are going to.
But he'll want to play Premier League.
He wants to play the Premier League, of course, yeah. But okay, they weren't the best yesterday, but you can't dislodge Luiz and Kamara.
I'm not saying they should come out of the team, by the way.
No, I know. You just players, having spoken to so many players over the years about when they're in and out of the team, they're desperate to get in the team, and it's always difficult when you've just moved to a club because you want to come and make an impression, and it's quite tough. In fact, it's really tough when you move to a club and then you're not playing regularly because you almost feel like that honeymoon period has gone, and people you get afforded a little bit of time, don't you, as a new player? And if you just how many months of the season's gone now? 4 months. It's like he's no longer really seen as a new player, is it? It's like we know what Tielemans is going to do, but he hasn't actually fully had the chance to show it yet. Already, we know what he's got. Like Dendoncker as well, to a lesser extent. Just hasn't played many games. We've seen him a little bit yesterday, but I think, yeah. I mean, look, that maybe Emery's just going to have to be brave at some times and play him instead of either Luiz or Kamara.
I think Luiz is a lock. He's a lock in that team. Luiz is
Villa's I think they both are. I think they both are. But at some point, maybe you just might have to mix it up. I mean, look, inevitably, one of them's probably going to pick up an injury or a suspension at some point.
Yeah.
You typically don't go through the whole season with your two midfielders playing every single game. So there are going to be opportunities, and if Villa stay in the cup competitions for a little bit longer, he's going to play more games. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be. You feel like it's going to be even harder, though, don't you, when Ramsey comes back? Because that's another middle area position taken up.
Yeah, because he can't really play the McGinn or Ramsey role. He can't. No. I don't think it worked well when he was playing.
Quick. He's not quite dynamic enough.
No, he's not got the mobility, I don't think, to play those roles, to play that role. But it was interesting in the last European game that he played not up alongside Watkins, but he was playing in Diaby's position. I said doing very different things, but he was playing in Diaby's role. But then there's not really an avenue to get in the team there, is it? Because Diaby and Watkins are going to play every week, so it must be hard for him at the moment. But he must. I feel like in some ways he must have known this when he came in. Because then he's not going to say.
I don't necessarily think he would have known it because, look, however honest or dishonest staff members are when they talk to players, every player that signs gets pretty much, unless you're, a backup goalkeeper, gets the guarantee that they're going to play. It's just how negotiations go. Come to our club, we're going to play. We see you as this, this, and this. There would have been a presentation that Villa would have done for him. This is where we see you playing, where we see you fitting in. We like this about you. We think you can improve this. This is what the manager's going to do with you, etc. So he would have been coming to Villa on the back of massive signing on bonus, incredibly big wages, wages that nobody else was prepared to pay. So he's got a brilliant deal on a long-term contract. So he's got that security and that safety net there. But players want two things: they want to be paid well and they want to play games. It's as simple as that, And he's got one of them, but he hasn't. But he's missing the other one.
Yeah, it's hard. It almost felt like, because Kamara and Luiz ended the season so well, a bit like Konsa and Mings, they were always going to start the season. But I wonder if Tielemans thinks that thought that he would have broken in by now.
I mean, look, in his interview, I think he did it with the Times, didn't he? He said, "Look, he's happy.
Yeah,
he's not sad at Villa." And there were staff members that were keen to sort of get that message out, because I think there'd been a little bit of
a load of rubbish
misreporting, that were inaccurate. So, he's not given up on his time at Villa or anything just yet. He knows there's plenty more months ahead to get in the team. But yeah, inevitably he wants to be playing. All players do. He's used to being a regular at Leicester in the Premier League and winning things. So he wants to be a part of it at Villa.
It's one to keep an eye on. I was crying out for him to come on somewhere. I quite liked it when we shifted to a back three, actually, and tried. I know it didn't really work, but we shifted to that back three, put Kamara in there, took Gash off, and kind of just told Bailey and Luka Dean to stay high and wide. I quite liked that as a change, because that's a change up from the usual system that we see. Obviously wanted to try and get back into the game. And I think it was nearly there. I think Villa did get into some dangerous positions, but when they were in the penalty area, bad decision making really was the downfall. It's so rare for us not to score that you're shocked by it.
Oh, mate,
can't believe it.
Shock. I think they've only not scored in 3 games under him.
Now.
4, is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, it's pretty incredible. They never draw 0-0, and they very, very rarely don't score.
Is it 3 or is it 4?
I think it's 3,
Have you done me there? I think you might have done me. Because I remember there's Man U and Wolves, there was 2 in a row.
I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm sure that's
Liverpool.
Liverpool, yeah. So it is
4. Come on, 1-0 Bardell. Let's come on. Yeah, right. On that note, let's hear a little bit more from NordVPN. 1874 is proudly sponsored by NordVPN, so when the Villa are playing and you can't watch it, we want to help you. NordVPN is a secure and private service which works on pretty much any device, including your laptop, mobile and your smart television. So if you want to watch some live content, it allows you to appear like you're in another country. And whilst you're connected, no one else can find out what you're doing, including your internet service provider. Beyond this, the service also has threat protection baked in to protect you from intrusive website ads and malware, which is pretty handy for you. As part of NordVPN supporting 1874, they have given us an exclusive deal of up to 65% off and 4 months for free. This also includes Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. All you've got to do is go to 1874.io/NordVPN and sign up. All the details are also in the description. Also, this November, NordVPN are also promoting Movember, which is a charity based in the UK which raises money to help fight mental health, suicide, prostate cancer and testicular cancer. All are amazing causes, and NordVPN has added a donation feature to their checkout which enables new users to donate £1, £5 or £10 or whatever the customer decides to donate. And even better, NordVPN will match every donation. As always, we're very grateful to anyone that signs up. We know that money is tight, but if you think NordVPN will help you out, it will also help keep the channel running and help us too. Back in European action on Thursday against AZ Alkmaar. It feels like a return leg, really, because we played them a few weeks ago, drubbing them 4-1 at their own place, which was a sensational performance and a sensational result, bearing in mind their home record. It's kind of still a game that Villa really need to win, because the group is a lot tighter than maybe we thought it was going to be, because we got that defeat in the first game. Thank God we won the second game very late, because it would be even more tight. But it's still, the group's pretty open, isn't it? So it's important to get 3 points again against Alkmaar at home at Villa Park. Yeah,
you look at it on paper and it does look like an open group. I'd very, very confident Villa will get out of it and progress. But yeah, the games are still there and anything can happen. An early sending off in the game could change something, and then suddenly you're up against it. And look, the last home game was a lot more difficult than than many of us expected. So Villa have got to go and get the job done. I'll back them to do that. And then I think they can't take the foot off the gas, but they can relax a little bit because they know it's all, it's almost secure then, isn't it? I think, I think the supporters are really enjoying the return to Europe as well. I've got quite a few friends who, class themselves as Villa fans, but are not season ticket holders. They don't go very often, but they've been able to get tickets for the games this year. And it's, giving them like a, new lease of life and a bit of a fresh impetus, and they're loving football and going to the football again, and it's great to see that. Those are some of the sort of untold stories of getting back into Europe. Just fans that haven't gone to games for a long time and now going back because they've got access to tickets. And look, ultimately that's what Villa as a club from a business side of things wants to do as well. It wants to get more customers or into the door. Never call them customers, but that's business talk there. Be like Steve. We'll have to get Steve Hollis back on the podcast.
I had in my head it was Tom Foxy, wasn't it? Was it? It was Steve Hollis.
But no, I mean, from a fan perspective, it's great for people to be able to get back to the games and enjoy it again.
So I had this conversation with someone yesterday, and look, everyone's finances are different, and people are the hard times in the world at the moment for financially. Also, the club have upped the prices quite considerably. It feels like at times the club's coming at fans for every angle, from every angle. Sorry, money wise, at the moment. But I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, and that last game against Brighton, full house, so much was made about qualifying for Europe. That Mostar game, there was a lot of empty seats. Do you think it's down to the fact it's the group stage? Maybe it's not seen as a big game. Would you expect it to be full this Thursday? Because we all wanted to qualify for Europe so badly. Like we all, I had to miss the Hibs game for work, for example, and I kind of, because they'd already won 5-1, I didn't try and manipulate what I was doing, because I knew I was at Sky Sports News in the morning, so I didn't go to that game. So there's different reasons people don't go to games, but there's never an empty seat really in the league games. But whereas in that European game, there was quite a lot of empty seats. What do you put that down to? What's your opinion on that?
The fact that they're not included in the season tickets either. So it's like, Villa have got 30,000 plus, I think 30,000, they cap it at season tickets. So, all of a sudden you've got 30,000 fans that go every single week, and they think, do I want to be paying an extra, what is it, 30, 39 quid, 40 quid, whatever it is?
I've paid around £90 for 3 tickets.
Yeah, so I mean, 30 quid, they're like, do I want to pay another 30 quid when, everything's rising. My bills are going up more all the time. If I'm going with my 2 kids or whatever, it's adding to the price. Feels like a little bit of a piss take, the fact that European games aren't always included, or at least some of them aren't. I know from a business point of view, you need to extract as much money as possible to increase the revenues, across every sort of area, because that's, inevitably how Villa are going to kick on as a club. But just feels like little things like that, you should be sometimes should be included. And I think it's across the board. It's hospitality as well, player boxes. They have to pay extra for individual games as well. So it's something that the club will
bits as well, do they? So
yeah, it's something that the club want to monetize. And if Villa are still trying to close the gap, aren't they, and some of the bigger boys in the division. So it's maybe something you got to expect. But I think, just to answer your question, the fact that every seat's available, isn't it? It's like you've got to pay for every single seat again. Whereas a Premier League game, you've already got 30,000 seats sold immediately. Yeah. And sometimes, look, you say there's never a seat available, but there are some home games where tickets are available. So often there are a fair amount. And I think you've got like partner and commercial tickets there aren't as many handed out to European games because they're not as popular. So just frees up the areas a little bit more.
I know that for every game, the UEFA delegates, there's about 100 delegates that come in and like swarm in on the directors' club, and basically just if some people have got a table and stuff. I think the first game, like the UEFA people were just sitting where they wanted to. Right. From the stories I've heard, a lot of people have paid this money to have their usual table in the directors' club for the European games, and then come in and the UEFA guys sat at the table just come in and like they're the priority, which is absolutely mad. I do think it'll pick up if they get to the knockouts. Maybe I think there'll be better teams that fall out of the Europa League, as well as there's potentially some mouth-watering ties. I think Alkmaar will probably be more full than the Mostar game.
Yeah, you'd imagine so, wouldn't you?
It's a bigger game, isn't it?
Bigger game. It's deeper into the competition. There's more at stake. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. It's interesting. Like I say, the fans at the moment are really feeling it because there is been asked for an awful lot from the club at the moment in terms of the price rises over the last 2 years as well. It's gone up exponentially. So not knocking anyone at all. I just wanted to talk to you about it and get your thoughts, and you've covered that. So, Greg, I believe you've got a press box archive for us to finish. The one thing you have to do in the league is podcast, and you've done it.
Yeah, we're going back a few years. I was trying to think of some interesting stories to say, and this takes us back to the summer of 2015, which is pretty incredible, really, because it's over 8 years ago, and I genuinely can't believe it was. It's been that long when I think back to it. But Villa were in Albufeira on a pre-season trip, which, away from all the work I had to do, was probably one of the best pre-season trips I've been on. I had a really good time. There was only 3 of us on the trip. Myself, a guy from the Daily Mail, and the Sun. And we went out, pretty much most nights and had a few drinks and socialised. But there was loads of stuff that happened. It was like the Delph U-turn, Benteke leaving. There was quite a lot going on. But we were invited, the 3 reporters that went out, we were invited by Tim Sherwood, who was the manager at the time, to a dinner, just with some of his staff, and we had a few drinks, and we had a bit of food, and the stories were getting shared around and stuff. And Sherwood said, "Right, guys, you've got 2 minutes to guess who our next striker is going to be, and if you guess it, we'll say, we'll tell you." Like, so we're reeling off all these names, a couple of Premier League strikers, a few in the Championship.
I bet you reeled off Adebayor.
A couple in Scotland, and a few up in different European countries. Anyway, 2 minutes have passed, and he said, "Look, that's it. You didn't get it." And we're like scratching our heads for the rest of the night, thinking, "Who the hell are Villa going to sign then?" And anyway, days or weeks later, I can't remember how long it was, turned out they got bloody Rudy Gestede, and we were just thinking, like, of all the names that we'd have thrown at him, Rudy Gestede just never even crossed our mind. And I mean, look, you know, he had his moments, didn't he? Scored a couple of big goals for Villa, one against Blues, and he got a couple at Liverpool, didn't he? If I remember that away game, the Villa lost 3-2. No. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of just a sign of what was to come. If we couldn't guess the striker in 2 minutes, then you know what were Villa expected to do with this guy that was coming in. So
I found him probably the most. I didn't dislike him. I don't really ever dislike, and I just found him hard work to watch. I just never felt he had it. And going from Benteke to him, it just felt like the biggest downgrade I've ever seen Villa have in terms of a player coming in. Incidentally, ironically, I posted something on Twitter the other day, an article that I can't even remember what I was doing. This was the wild Friday night I was having. I was looking for something, and I stumbled across this article on Ladbrokes. So I'll just read it to you. So this was on the 31st of July 2015 by someone called Matt Wiggins. I mean, this could have been the last article he ever wrote. I don't know what he's gone on to do, Matt Wiggins. But the headline is Aston Villa win the transfer window with Benteke replacement.
Wow.
And then the first two paragraphs. If Rudy Gestede passes the Aston Villa medical he is reported to be undertaking in the coming days, Tim Sherwood may have just pulled off a masterstroke in the summer transfer window, having received $32.5 million for striking talisman Christian Benteke earlier in the off-season. The former Tottenham Hotspur manager has landed a deal to sign one of the closest imitations in England to the Belgian brute at a snip of the price. Has an article ever been more? I don't know if you've ever wrote anything that turned out to be really real. I've certainly said things that turned out to be really wrong.
I'd have done things and said things over the years that turned out to be wrong. But that was
very wrong.
Love a bit of new signing optimism, don't you? Gotta love a bit of that.
First time I watched him, it was obviously came on and scored in the Bournemouth game. Fine, great, we won 1-0. And you think, oh, phew, okay, maybe we'll be okay this season. And then the second game to Manchester United, I remember at home, and I was thinking, was it a Friday night for some reason? I think it was a Friday night. We lost 1-0. I remember watching him and just thinking, oh dear, we're in trouble here. This guy can't move. If the ball lands on his head, he's okay, but he can't move.
From speaking to people around the club at that time, it was because it was very mixed, wasn't it? You know, Sherwood was trying to sign certain players, and then the recruitment team, which was fronted by Paddy Riley at the time, was pushing other players, and it was there was no sort of harmony or cohesion between the two of them. But I think, from what I can remember, it was a joint decision, that one, and that they'd looked at all the stats about his heading ability and the fact that he was quite durable. He didn't miss many games. And Villa were signing wide players at that point. Amavi was expected to kick on as a decent fullback. I think Adama Traore came in as well, didn't he? I'm sure they got one more winger.
Scott Sinclair was still there on the wing.
Sinclair, yeah, had a bit of a run, but so the aim was to play sort of through wingers and wide players and hope that he'd get on the end of things. But yeah, sadly, it just didn't work out.
And the worst thing is that he actually wasn't Benteke's replacement, because they tried to sign Adebayor. And the fact that they practically did sign Emmanuel Adebayor.
That's for another day, yeah.
We'll save that story for maybe we'll do that one next week, because I've got some stuff around that as well. It's absolutely crazy time that happened. So actually, they did try and sign another striker on top of Gestede, but it never went through. But yeah, for nothing against Rudy Gestede, but he was just a player that I could never warm to in terms of footballing ability. And I think maybe it was because I loved Benteke so much as well that I really struggled with Gestede as a.
I mean, it was impossible, and it was impossible.
It's a hard job.
Them. And look, Villa lost the entire spine of their team that year.
Disaster.
Vlar, Delph, Benteke,
Cleverly.
Yeah, it was, and Cleverly had started to come pretty good, hadn't they? So it was a difficult one.
Yeah. Great times. Good to hear of you at the trip though. At the Gregg, there's some great photos of you in that from that era, isn't there? On
goodness, man.
On Google Gregg image search Gregg Evans. There's a photo like you're signing Jordan Amava. There's a great.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I bloody love that photo. I'll put it up on social media so that people can see. A nice one of you pointing as well that I like.
Yeah, they used
Oh, I
to,
love
my former employees, they used to do that. They used to use that one to wind me up.
Oh,
So we
absolutely.
stop using that bloody picture.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
If you're looking for an accompaniment to this podcast, and when you're listening, Google Greg Evans and click on images. There's some great photos. When you were Tammy Abraham's agent as well, there's a lovely
Yeah,
photo
that's
of you
good
with
fun.
a lovely
That's good
photo
fun.
with you and Tammy Abraham as well. So yeah, do that. Treat yourself. It always cheers me up. Whenever I'm feeling down, I go on Google, pop in Greg's name, and look at the image search. That's it for this week's 1874 podcast. We've managed to have a laugh despite Villa losing. So thank you very much to those that have tuned in. We'll be back for some more shows through the week, obviously with the 2 games coming up as well. So watch out for them. Wherever you're taking in the podcast, subscribe with your post notifications on. Leave the video a like on YouTube, please. And I don't even know if you can do that thing on audio, but if you can, do it there as well. Leave a comment as well with what you've thought about what we've said in this podcast. Let me know as well if you've done a Google image search on Gregg. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. So please do that. Thanks very much to Gregg for joining me. Thanks to Adam for producing. And thank you as well to NordVPN for sponsoring us. Do check out the link in the description if you want to help yourself out with NordVPN, if that's something that you need in your life. Have a